I do have very happy memories of childhood.
It has been the longest of all apprenticeships, taking over many of his mother's duties in recent years, a king more than 7 decades in the making.
For decades, he stood behind palace walls, smiling, waving, reigning, but no one truly knew the man beneath the crown. Now, at 75, King Charles has finally broken the silence that shadowed his life.
I am reminded of the deeply touching letters, cards, and messages which so many of you have sent my wife and myself.
What he's revealed isn't just unexpected, it's heartbreaking. Secrets long buried have clawed their way to the surface. And what he admits has shaken even the most loyal royal followers. This is the confession that could change how we see the monarchy forever. The silence breaks after 75 years. For decades, the world watched him with curious eyes, the quiet prince who became king, wrapped in royal duties and timeless silence. But now, at the age of 75, that silence has finally shattered. What King Charles just confessed has stunned even those closest to the monarchy, and it's far from the dignified image we thought we knew. The corridors of Buckingham Palace have held more secrets than the world will ever uncover. Whispers travel faster than time inside royal walls, but this time, the whispers weren't enough. For years, Charles remained a figure of discipline, appearing in royal processions, delivering public speeches, and upholding traditions older than memory itself. But something changed. This year, on a quiet evening away from cameras, the king opened up, not to a journalist, not in a speech, but in a closed circle of people he trusted more than his own title. What he said was not rehearsed. It wasn't approved by the palace. And it certainly wasn't meant to become public. But somehow, it did. And once the words slipped out into the open world, they couldn't be taken back. Was it guilt, age, or something deeper that pushed him to speak at last? We may never know the full trigger. But what we do know is that his admission has shocked historians, royal insiders, and even his own family. And the real question now isn't just what he said, but why he waited 75 years to say it.
This is also a time of change for my family.
Shadows of the crown. Power often casts long shadows, and within those shadows, truth often hides. Since childhood, Charles was told what to say, how to walk, and what to show the world. Behind the royal facade was a boy wrestling with invisible chains. What we're learning now reveals just how deep those chains were. And the cost he paid in silence was far greater than anyone imagined. Before he was a king, Charles was a young boy growing up under the world's most watchful gaze. Every laugh, every tear, every mistake was quietly corrected or completely hidden. From the moment he could walk, his path was already carved in stone. His life was not his own. And that may be where the damage first began. In private letters discovered by insiders close to the palace, Charles hinted at something deeper, a truth he buried even from those closest to him. Words like isolation, burden, and lifelong struggle were scattered through his writings like breadcrumbs. The palace dismissed them as poetic exaggeration, but now those words carry a different weight, because what he recently confessed lines up with those emotional cracks we once ignored. What if his role as future king didn't empower him, but broke him? What if the fairy tale life was more of a well-decorated prison? This wasn't just a royal confession, it was a soul unraveling, thread by thread. And as more details leak, the question is no longer just about his past. It's about how much truth the monarchy has hidden all along. The weight of a loveless crown. Some truths aren't buried. They're paraded in plain sight, only no one dares to speak them. Charles's love life has long been public theater, but what if everything we thought we saw was just the surface? What he's now admitting reveals something far more painful than scandal. This wasn't just betrayal, it was emotional imprisonment. The world watched the royal wedding of Charles and Diana as though it was a fairy tale.
The Archbishop of Canterbury called the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer today the stuff of fairy tale.
Smiles, waves, royal kisses. It had all the signs of a perfect union. But behind the balcony smiles were two people living completely separate emotional lives. Diana spoke out before her tragic death. Charles never did. Until now. In his private admission, Charles reportedly described the marriage not just as a mistake, but as a sacrifice made for the crown. He used chilling words. I was instructed to feel what I did not feel. It wasn't about love, it was duty, appearances, preservation. And in that silent performance, two lives were slowly suffocated. He confesses he wanted to walk away more than once, not just from the marriage, but from the entire royal system. But pressure, tradition, and reputation silenced every instinct. It wasn't that he didn't care, it was that he couldn't choose. This wasn't a confession of guilt, it was a revelation of helplessness. And for the first time, Charles isn't just a monarch. He's a man publicly haunted by choices he never truly made. Now we must ask, was the monarchy worth the lives it privately broke? Camilla, the unspoken war. Every story has its villain, or so we're told. For decades, Camilla was painted as the other woman, the homewrecker, the scandal behind palace curtains. But what Charles is now revealing turns that old story upside down. It wasn't betrayal, it was survival. While the public threw stones, few understood the quiet force Camilla truly was. Charles, in his confession, revealed she was more than a lover. She was his lifeline.
I count on the loving help of my darling wife, Camilla. In recognition of her own loyal public service since our marriage 17 years ago, she becomes my queen consort.
When the weight of expectations crushed him, Camilla was the only person who understood the person, not the prince. He admits now that his heart belonged to her long before the world ever knew, and not because of rebellion, but because she was his only safe place, his only real home. In one moment of vulnerability, Charles allegedly said, "She didn't want the crown. She wanted me. That's why I needed her." But even that love came with a price. Camilla was hated, mocked, and turned into a symbol of disgrace. Yet she remained in the background, quiet, enduring. His confession now, after so many years, seems as much a plea for her forgiveness as his own. This isn't the story we were told. And maybe that's the real tragedy. The truth about their love was buried beneath decades of scandal, half-truths, and pain. Now, at 75, Charles seems desperate to show the world that love, real love, was there all along, just hidden behind a wall of royal shame. The Queen's cold shadow mothers shape destinies. But when your mother is the Queen of England, her shadow doesn't shelter, it overpowers. Charles's latest revelations shed a startling light on the cold, distant relationship between him and Queen Elizabeth. And the truth is more heartbreaking than expected. To the world, Elizabeth was a pillar of grace and authority. But behind royal walls, Charles experienced something far less tender. He described his mother as an institution before a mother. Emotional distance, strict boundaries, and royal protocol left him starved for warmth. In his confession, he shared moments from childhood where he longed for her presence. Birthdays missed, letters instead of hugs, appearances instead of affection.
I remember when I was young, my parents both enjoyed the filming things.
He even recalled how palace staff were warmer to him than his own parents. He doesn't blame her directly. In fact, he speaks with respect. But between the lines, there's a sorrow no crown can hide. He said, "The throne came before my tears, and so I learned not to cry." It was a royal education in emotional suppression, and it didn't just shape the man, it broke parts of the child within. Now, looking back at a mother the world adored, Charles seems to finally say what he never dared to. The Queen was an icon, but not the mother he needed. It's a revelation that humanizes him, stings the heart, and quietly begs the world to understand that behind the gold curtains, a son was left, reaching out in vain. The guilt that never left time doesn't erase guilt. It buries it. And if buried long enough, it begins to rot the soul. In his private admissions, Charles didn't just recall his regrets. He confessed to carrying guilt so heavy, it nearly reshaped him. And once you hear it, you'll understand why it never let him go. Charles has long been criticized for how things unfolded with Diana. But behind closed doors, it wasn't public opinion that haunted him. It was the silence that followed her death. He reportedly told close confidants that he often wonders what might have happened if he had spoken up, fought harder, or walked away sooner. He wasn't mourning only her death. He was mourning the way her spirit was crushed. He admitted that she was never protected the way she should have been. Not by the press, not by the palace, and certainly not by him. At one point, Charles allegedly said, "The truth is, I knew she was drowning." And I stood there, hoping tradition would save her. It's a devastating line, one that reveals not just pain, but shame. He has spent decades smiling for cameras, wearing medals, fulfilling roles. But inside, he remained trapped in the moment where he let the love of his life suffer publicly and die tragically. This chapter of his admission wasn't royal, it was raw. And in that rawness, Charles may have revealed the deepest scar he's ever carried, one the world can never truly forgive, and he may never truly heal from. Secrets between brothers. Publicly, William and Harry are the face of modern royalty. Privately, they're the echo of a broken bond. But what few knew until now is that Charles himself may have played a larger role in that fracture than he ever admitted. And his confession reveals a father caught between two sons and his own failure to choose. When Harry stepped away from the royal family, many blamed the media, Meghan, or even Harry himself.
Prince Harry and Meghan stepped down from royal duties last year and moved to the United States.
But in his private talks, Charles quietly accepted part of the blame. He admitted that he had no idea how to be a father while being the future king. He described how duty always overshadowed family time. He missed school events, holidays, and even Harry's personal struggles. He confessed that he didn't listen, he managed. He didn't comfort, he deflected. The real bombshell came when he allegedly said, "I taught them to act like royals, but forgot to teach them how to be brothers." It's a haunting sentence, one that suggests the breakdown between William and Harry wasn't just a personal conflict, it was generational damage. Charles sees the cracks in the family as partly his own doing. He now watches his sons at war, his grandchildren divided, and the family legacy under fire, not from outsiders, but from within. His confession isn't just about regret. It's about a father's realization that the institution he upheld may have stolen his chance to be a real parent. And now, the consequences are playing out on a global stage. The hidden letters. Some truths are spoken, others are written, and hidden away. Deep within the royal archives lie letters never meant to be seen by the public. But according to insiders, Charles referenced these in his confession, and what they contain could shift everything we thought we knew. These weren't state papers or government files. These were personal letters, emotional records of a man unraveling beneath the pressure of becoming king. Written across decades, they reveal feelings the world never associated with Charles: loneliness, confusion, fear. One letter reportedly read, "I often wonder what I would have become if I were born a common man." Another described palace life as a museum of living ghosts. He wrote about walking through the halls of Balmoral, hearing laughter from rooms that no longer held joy. He wrote about longing to escape, not from duty, but from the emptiness it created. These letters were addressed to no one. Some were never sent, but he kept them. each word a confession to paper, safer than speaking them aloud. Until now. Why is he mentioning these letters now? Some believe it's because he no longer fears their discovery. Others think he wants the truth preserved, even if it shatters the royal image. Whatever the reason, these letters reveal a man not consumed by power, but by emptiness. And when a king speaks through unsent letters, we're no longer hearing royalty. We're hearing humanity cry out from inside a golden cage. The truth about the crown. Everyone wants the crown, until they wear it. From the outside, it glitters. From within, it bleeds. And now, for the first time, Charles is pulling back the curtain on what the monarchy really does to a person. What he's saying could forever change how the public sees the British throne. The monarchy, to most, is a symbol of glory and stability. But in private, Charles sees it differently. In his words, the crown is a duty masked as privilege. It is a burden that parades as honor. He describes long years of self-denial, where personal dreams were traded for national expectations. Every word was scripted, every emotion edited. He couldn't love freely. He couldn't grieve openly. The crown didn't just limit him, it reshaped him. He reportedly admitted that he once envied ordinary people for being able to walk into a cafe unnoticed. To live without eyes always watching. That's a luxury I've never known, he said. Charles isn't rejecting the monarchy, but he's revealing its cost. Not in pounds or jewels, but in human spirit. He questioned whether the crown truly serves the people, or whether it simply protects tradition at the expense of those who wear it. It's a revelation that few monarchs have dared to make. And now that it's public, it forces everyone to ask, how long can an outdated crown survive in a world that's waking up to its emotional casualties? Diana's silent message. The world remembers Diana for her grace, her pain, her tragic end. But Charles now reveals that before her passing, Diana left behind a message, one that he says still haunts him.
The public response to Diana's death, it has been really quite remarkable and indeed in many ways overwhelming.
It wasn't written, it wasn't spoken, but it was clear, and it changed him forever. Just days before her death, Charles recalls an encounter that was brief, but heavy with unspoken truth. Diana had looked him in the eye, no anger, no bitterness, just silence. But in that silence, he said, "She forgave me," and that was the worst part. He wasn't prepared for her forgiveness. He had expected resentment, but instead, she left him with the guilt of grace. That final interaction, he now confesses, left a deeper scar than any headline or public scandal. For years, he replayed that moment in his mind, wondering what she might have said if she had lived. And perhaps, more painfully, what he might have said if he'd had one more chance. In his words, "I learned too late that silence is not peace. It's the sound of everything left unsaid." This chapter of his confession wasn't about marriage or monarchy. It was about the unbearable weight of a missed goodbye. Diana didn't need to accuse him. Her silence did more than words ever could. And to this day, Charles says that silence speaks louder than the cheers at his coronation. The day he almost walked away. Kings don't quit, or so we're told. But what if they wanted to? What if they stood at the edge of everything and quietly considered disappearing? Charles did. And now, for the first time, he's admitting the day he nearly walked away from it all. It wasn't during a scandal. It wasn't after Diana's death. It was much earlier, long before he became king. Charles revealed that during his 30s, after years of royal obligations, he reached a breaking point. The crown felt like a curse. His identity felt like fiction. He described how he once drove through the countryside alone, no security, no schedule, just him and the road. For hours, he didn't want to return. He didn't want to be found. "I felt freer in those hours than I had in my entire life," he said. He thought of disappearing, starting a life in another country, becoming someone else. Not forever, but long enough to feel real again. but duty called, and he returned. Not because he wanted to, but because the system didn't allow a choice. He said, even escape was rehearsed. That moment stayed with him. He never tried it again, but it became the quiet reminder of what he gave up. A normal life, a personal truth, a self not shaped by legacy. And now, looking back, he confesses, maybe that version of him, the one on that lonely road, was the truest version he ever knew. The burden of being firstborn. To be first in line is to be last in freedom. Charles didn't choose to be born into royalty, but that birthright became a contract signed in silence. And now, he's finally admitting what that role truly cost him, from childhood until now. Firstborn royals are taught to lead, obey, represent, and sacrifice. But Charles says he was never taught to feel. From his earliest days, he wasn't allowed to cry, falter, or even ask why. Everything was planned. Even rebellion had boundaries. In his confession, he compared being firstborn to living in a glass coffin, visible to all but unable to move freely. He spoke of envy, not hatred, for Andrew and Edward, who weren't shackled to the throne. And even for Anne, who found ways to slip beneath the radar. Charles felt the weight of destiny before he understood its meaning. He was too young to consent, too old to escape. He admits he often wished he had been born second. That wish was never spoken aloud until now. He doesn't regret being king, but he regrets what he never got to become. A writer, perhaps, a quiet historian, a gardener, anything not drenched in symbolism. Now, in his twilight years, he looks back not just at a life lived, but a life scripted. And for the first time, he seems to say,
King Charles
King
III
of kings
is acclaimed.
And Lord of lords, bless, we beseech thee, this crown.
this crown fits, but it never truly belonged to me. The prison of public perception. For a lifetime, Charles has been watched, measured, and misunderstood. But now, in his own words, he's calling out the biggest illusion of all, the image the public built around him. Because the truth, he says, was never behind the smile. It was behind the silence. From the outside, Charles was seen as cold, calculated, and emotionally distant, the heir who never quite fit. But in his confession, he explained that the public didn't see him. They saw a reflection of the monarchy's mold. He wasn't allowed to speak freely, laugh too loudly, or cry too openly. Every headline distorted his moments. Every expression was either mocked or misread. Over time, he stopped showing emotion, not because he didn't feel it, but because the world refused to see it for what it was. Charles said, "I became what they needed, not what I was." It's a tragic realization that the man inside the crown was drowned by the image of it. He now admits he sometimes watched interviews and media coverage of himself and didn't recognize the person they described. They created a version of me I could never live up to or live down. In those words lies the heart of his lifelong conflict, being seen but never truly known. And now, at 75, it seems that the man once silenced by perception is finally beginning to speak. His message to the future king: every father leaves something behind, but a king leaves behind a warning. Charles has watched William prepare for the throne, and in his most vulnerable confession yet, he shares the one message he hopes his son never forgets. It isn't about power. It's about pain. Charles has spent decades shaping William into a king, but now he questions what kind of legacy he's handing down. "I taught him everything I was told," Charles said, "but I fear I passed down more of my wounds than my wisdom." He warns William not to lose himself in duty, not to let the throne consume the man inside the robe. He urges him to protect his children from the life he couldn't escape. "If you must be king," he says, "be one with a soul. Don't trade your truth for the crown." It's not rebellion. It's a father begging his son not to disappear beneath the weight of tradition. Charles knows the public will never stop watching, but he hopes William will find a way to live beyond the spotlight, to redefine what it means to be royal, not with perfection, but with humanity. In that plea, we hear something rare. A king who finally sees that legacy isn't just in castles, it's in the hearts we leave behind. And Charles wants his son to inherit more than power. He wants him to inherit peace. The final admission. All stories must end, and this one ends not with fireworks or scandal, but with a whisper. Charles has said much, but it's his final admission that changes everything. Because it isn't just about the past, it's a confession meant for the world, and for himself. In his last quiet moment, Charles admitted what he had never said out loud. I didn't want to be king, but I became one because I had no choice. And now, I choose to be honest, even if it's too late. He spoke of time, how it had taught him to value silence, but also how silence had become his greatest regret. He said he now understands that strength isn't found in obedience, but in vulnerability. He doesn't ask for sympathy. He doesn't want applause. What he asks is simple. Let the next generation live more freely than I did. Let them speak. Let them be heard. With those words, King Charles didn't just confess. He evolved. His legacy won't be carved only into marble or stitched into royal banners. It will echo through the honesty of a man who wore a crown, but finally removed the mask. And so, the king's story becomes something greater than a royal tale. It becomes a reminder that even those at the top carry shadows, and the bravest thing they can ever do is finally bring them into the light. And so, the man who stood silent behind the golden gates has finally spoken. Not as a king, not as a royal, but as a human being, flawed, burdened, and searching for peace. His confession wasn't just about scandal or sorrow, it was a cry for understanding. At 75, Charles didn't just admit what we all suspected, he gave voice to the pain we never truly saw. In doing so, he reminded the world that even the crown sits heavy on a fragile soul. And sometimes, the boldest act of royalty is telling the truth.